happens when the birth plan changes? Because sometimes it changes. And the thing that I like to work on with my clients is how to prepare for those changes, because we never ever know what our babies are going to decide for us. And I know that we don't want to think about that. We don't want to think about C-sections. We don't want to think about any unnecessary complications or necessary complications that could happen. And so this conversation today is going to be about what happens when the birth plan changes. Can you still have a positive experience? Can you still have as close to the birth plan that you wrote down? What do you do? And if you followed me any time on this journey or listened to any of the birth stories that I've shared, then you would know that sometimes things change, and that is okay. So today I'm going to be talking to one of the mamas who I was fortunate enough to support, and her birth plan changed. And so we're going to talk about why that change happened. What do you do if something changes, and how to continue to have a positive experience despite those changes. So I'm going to see, and I know I'm coming early this morning because y'all, you can only really learn through hearing
Hello,
other
how
people's
are you?
experiences that actually went through it in real life. So yeah, hey Kira,
It's 3 p.m.
how you doing? I'm good. How are you? So what time is it where you are? 3 p.m. And so I also wanted to call out, this is obviously not a part of what we're talking about today, but I wholeheartedly believe like I have the like coolest, dopest, most like amazing clients that I work with. And every single one of them is like so unique in their own way. But Garrett and her family moved all the way across the sea. And now I'll let you do your intro. But now she doesn't even live close to us anymore. Not that you were like super close, but you're still in the States. So I was like, I want to come visit you. And now I have to come visit her in a much further place because my clients just like do the coolest things with their lives. So anywho, with all that being said, we're going to jump into the actual conversation, but
Parker.
tell us who you are.
I
Tell us about your
am
family, how long ago did you have a baby, all
We
that
have
stuff.
a now 1-year-old, Gianna Parker, and we had her back in the States in Atlanta, Georgia, about a year ago. We recently relocated to Spain, just change of course, change of life course, change of career path, exploring new things. And so that's kind of where we are now.
Yes, yeah, y'all. Like all my families are dope. So okay, let's just jump into like the conversation piece here. So almost, or actually a little, no, well, actually probably almost 2 years ago since you were pregnant. Um, you got pregnant and you decided, okay, I want to have a natural birth. And obviously that conversation about what kind of birth you want to have can become overwhelming. So let's start from the beginning. What made you decide from the beginning, or did you decide at the beginning you wanted to have a natural birth?
What kind of birth did we want to have? Obviously, lots of maternal like media, things in the media going around, especially in Atlanta, about like the maternal death rate of Black mothers, all of these things. So we were just having these conversations casually. But when it got real for us was actually when we experienced a miscarriage. And we were in Atlanta and we knew nothing. Like we weren't necessarily planning to have a baby at the time, and we found out we were pregnant, and everything kind of happened so quickly. We went to the hospital, a hospital there in Georgia, and honestly, just had the worst possible imaginable experience, and really just felt helpless and felt thing. Like we didn't know what was supposed to be happening. We didn't know what the procedures were. And after that experience, we just felt like we never wanted. and you know, someone that you didn't necessarily know or trust, but at the same time you weren't educated enough to know what to ask for or what to say or what should be happening. And so that was really when we were like, okay, we need to seriously, we need to make sure that what's in our, what we can control about, you know, pregnancy and giving birth, that we do that we educate ourselves. And so that's when we made the decision that, one, we needed to get a doula, and two, we wanted to go natural.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so kind of a lot of your stuff was rooted out of personal experience. Maybe not even as much of what you heard from people, but it's like, hey, that thing, like, I don't want that to be my situation when I'm having a baby this time around. So then fast forward, you get pregnant, you decide, okay, I'm going to hire a doula. I'm going to have this natural birth. Because you started off still, like, when we met, you were planning on having a baby in the hospital, right? So let's start there. First, what made you decide to have a virtual doula? Because I was your doula, and I do not live in Atlanta. Most of you know that. So what made you decide, okay, let's just
it was all
explore this virtual doula thing.
You. Like,
even though I'm giving birth in a
like
hospital in a place that
I was
I'm
following
like,
you for some time, and just, you know, watching your content, learning what you were saying. And even before we met virtually the first time, I felt as though I had this certain level of trust for you already. And then once we got on the call, that was only heightened. One of the main things too, I think, that sold us on you were your values. Spiritually, I felt like we connected there like 100%. And that was something that was extremely important to us. And honestly, something that I didn't even know was in a doula, you know, client relationship. And so, and the whole virtual aspect of it, but we felt reassured. You also let us know that, you know, that's also a reason that Chavez is there, my partner, that he can support me through this, which proved to be true. And we wouldn't have changed it either way. If you could have, but but it still went well.
I love that. Yes, I would have loved to be there, of course. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And obviously y'all will hear the whole story in a second. But so we start working together, and we're talking through things. We're starting to prep, like really digging into the things that your family specifically needed to kind of like focus on. And then we got to this crossroads where you're like, I think I'm going to switch providers. I think I'm going to leave the hospital experience now. What made that, like, I can't remember how many weeks you were, but like, walk us all through that experience. Because I think it's ironic once you guys hear the story about how
so I think initially
and how the story ended.
Really
so like, tell me why we
weren't as educated about like birth centers or even at home births. And then I think there was a little bit of a fear element. Like maybe if we were at home or at a birth center that we just weren't knowledgeable about at the time. And even around having the discussion with my parents, for example, of, oh, we're not gonna have this baby in the hospital. It's just not something that they were familiar with. So getting past all of that, and having to take into consideration how I was feeling in going to my appointments with the provider that I had at the time, was already speaking to me about having a C-section, or, you know, keeping in mind, because my husband was like a 12-pound baby. Oh, we should definitely prep for a C-section just in case. And these are the types of comments that were being made. And not only that, comments about like, surgery after giving, because that provider also owns like a cosmetic surgery practice. And it was just very, just very off-putting put a horrible taste in my mouth, and I just didn't feel comfortable there. Every time I went there, it got worse. And so I think even if I were to stick with it, because comfortable. And so that's when we started looking at other options. There's got to be something better. And honestly, a lot of the things that we had started talking to you about and just hearing about giving birth in a hospital setting, we're starting to like be true in that provider. And so we felt like the best way to set up ourselves for success was to go to a provider that we wouldn't necessarily have to advocate so much. Like, it's like they already get it, if that makes sense. Like there's a certain say, and we knew that we would find that going to a birth center. That's what helped us make the decision.
Right. Got it. Yes. Okay, in 1 second. Somebody said the audio is not great. Is that the same thing for y'all? Is anybody else experiencing that too? Just want to make sure. Because I know last time I came live, it was like an audio thing, and it might have been I
wonder if it's me or...
Is anybody else experiencing that? Okay. Okay, is this any better for anybody? For those of you who said, is this better? Because I can move.
On the gas end. Okay, maybe it's
okay. It's better.
Let me try to move a little bit.
Sorry, y'all. So
sometimes this Wi-Fi is kind of.
Yeah, and also as we're talking right now, y'all can say if you can let us know if it's any better. Is this better, y'all? Still? Okay, we're gonna keep talking to see if it picks up or changes as we like continue in the conversation. Because I see you and hear you fine, so I'm wondering if let's just keep talking and see. So, okay, so then we end up switching and tell people, because this is another conversation that I have a lot of times too. Your birth center was not close to you. And so sometimes I'll talk to clients, especially if they're in rural areas, they'll be like, yes, there's like a birth center, but it's really far away and whatever. And so the hospital is only 5 minutes down the road. Your birth center was not close to you.
It was about
how close or far was it? And more, then how did that factor into your decision?
And this was actually one of the reasons too we didn't want to do the home birth, was because the nearest hospital to us was the one that we had that horrible experience at, and the rest were like so far away. So we're like, okay, let's go to the birth center. And around the birth center, there are multiple hospitals if need be. But we were just like, we're just going to have to plan around this. And so we had planned to, get a hotel near the birth center, like when I was in labor or active labor, to kind of ride things out. Go as planned. Didn't let that kind of things progress while you're in the car. Of course, so we got that part. It was worth it.
Good. Okay, good. And so now let's fast forward. Actually, before we get to the story, what ended up, because you talked about it earlier, like there was like a spiritual aspect to this, and obviously becoming mentally prepared and working through some of the fears that you might have realized were coming up even from your personal experience. But I don't know why. Okay, well, I guess the audio is still a little bit scratchy, but we're gonna work through it.
Okay, so
but
honestly,
what did help you become mentally and spiritually prepared?
Because just reading my Bible, preparing the song list with all of the, gospel songs and things that would put me in the right mood. I think, or the right mind frame, I should say. I think one thing that I learned from you was that we were designed to do this, and our creator is the one that designed us to do this. And so he is the person that's going to see you through. And I don't think that I had ever, my whole life I have a relationship with him, but I never really thought of birth in that way, in that, oh my gosh, this is something that he can help me through. This is something that I can lean on him for. And so I started to do that more and more and more as time got closer, and just understanding and asking him, praying to him for what I wanted my birth to look like and what I just wanted out of the experience in general. And that gave me the mental strength that I need. Also learning through your course that it's going to be 80% mental. Another thing that I did not know about pregnancy, and that proved to be true, even those parts of my journey may not have gone exactly how I wanted it to. I think in the end, I can still say like 80% of that whole entire journey was mental. And so, yeah, the mental preparation, the spiritual preparation, but is the most important part of the journey, for sure.
Yeah. And so now let's fast forward to the actual big moment. Where did it start? How did it start? And then just like give us the details, as much or as little as you want, of the big day. And then I may ask some follow-ups like as you're talking, but just kind of walk us through, how did you know you were in labor? Because always a lot of first-time moms, they'll be like, how am I going to know when it's the real thing? Like, how do I know? And what does it feel like? And, the main questions that everybody wants to know. So tell us, because your birth plan did change. Spoiler alert, it did change. And there were lots of big decisions that had to be made. So
before I went
talk
into labor,
through all of that.
Some bloody show, like just a little, like kind of, you could miss it if you didn't even look hard enough. I want to say that was about 2 or 3 days before. And then it was early on a Monday morning, and I felt just some leaking, basically, from when I went to use the bathroom. Like, I got woken up by it, basically. And I went to use the bathroom, thought I had to pee, and I was like, okay, I think it's breaking. So for me, mine started with my water breaking. And so I went back to bed, and then that's when my water really broke. Like maybe like 30 minutes to an hour later, it was like a pretty good gush of water. Like, there's no question about it. Like, that's your water breaking 100%. And honestly, I was very calm. So quite opposite, of course, to what you see. Yeah. What you see in the movies about, oh my gosh, my water broke, and like this huge rush to the hospital and all of these emotions. That was not the case, because we were prepared. But my water broke, and I just kind of, tapped your bed and said, hey, my water broke. Let's just get up. And I messaged you, kind of took it slow, and you were obviously very calm, because you're just, and you were just like, oh, continue to get some rest, get some breakfast, take it easy. You told us all the things to do. Peaceful, calm morning. Like, contractions were not like heavy at all. They were just kind of happening. We were just kind of working through it, got on the bouncing ball, had breakfast. Like, my mom was there, so she cooked breakfast, and we were just, for the most part. And then I think just kind of fast forward as things got further along. Now, obviously, we had to go to the hotel. And we wanted to make sure that we were there in enough time for where things weren't so chaotic, like feeding rush hour and all of these things. So we started to make our way down, and really looking back, we probably could have stayed home a little longer, just to be like true about being like in your environment, in your comforting, like the peace of your home, basically. Because even though the hotel still wasn't our home. So, but we made a decision. Again, there's also some of that first time, you know, let's be over prepared type of things going on. So we got to the hotel thing, kind of made ourselves comfortable, laid down. Things were picking up a little bit. I think we were getting like late into the afternoon, maybe at this point. And we did our first check-in at the birth center. And they just were kind of doing some monitoring, you know, went through a couple of contractions there, and they were just, and I wasn't really, at that point, I think I was maybe still around 3 or so centimeters. This was kind of guessing. And so went back to the hotel. I want to say we did that maybe 3 times, like to the birth center and back to the hotel. They sent us back home for the night. And like very early, I want to say, like, I don't know, must have been like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or something, to the birth center again, because things were getting, like, contractions were coming a lot sooner. And so I was like, okay, we must be progressing. And so we went back to the birth center. Things were still moving very, very slowly. And so I think up until this point, this is like 24 hours now in labor, from 6 a.m. one morning to like 6 a.m. the next day. I was good. Like, I was pretty much in the birth zone, still there. And then I think like 24 hours was when my mental started to kind of slowly, like, and I think that was because my physical strength was also deteriorating at that time. And so I remember we got to a point at the birth center where they told us about the 30-hour limit. And so it was like, okay, this is like the first big decision, basically. It was like, because I was expressing that I really needed to rest. Like, I just need to lay down. Like, I need to get some sleep. And so it was basically a decision of, either we tried to give you something natural to sort of speed up labor, which we did. We took the castor oil, like, smoothie. But keep in mind that if you the decision to go to sleep that it needs right now, and need to have, like, and that's what we did. Everybody rested. Chavez passed out because he had not slept, you know, for the time that I had not slept. And so we all slept, and I do not regret it.
Yep.
You're okay. We all slept. I don't regret it one bit. And then and then when we woke up, it was basically like, okay, let's see where we are, kind of at that 30-hour mark, but still being hopeful that, you know, things had maybe progressed and we would be able to continue birth here. But, you know, we had the conversation with the team at the birth center, and they were like, okay, it's time to go because, you know, you're not progressing right now. I do want to mention that the environment center was amazing. Like, it was so quiet, it was so peaceful, it was had envisioned for my birth environment. Even though we didn't get to follow through, like, for those moments, it was exactly what we needed. And the reason I mentioned that was because the hospital environment, I immediately noticed the contrast. Hospital. But anyway, we transferred to the hospital. We drove there ourselves. Still, I was getting more and more uncomfortable in my contractions, for sure, because here, you know, I'm 30 hours in labor, and now we're kind of switching environments. I had some rest, so physically I had a little bit of energy, and mentally, you know, Chavez was there, my mom was there, both kind of motivating me. They had gone through my Chavez went through the course with me, obviously, so he knew the cues, he knew what to say, he knew all the things. To the hospital, and honestly, I think the reason why my mental kind of like deteriorated a little bit faster in the hospital is because it was almost like my first experience being there. And I don't want to say I lost it, but I wasn't in
like
the
PTSD.
zone. Mm-hmm. Let's just put it that way. I was more of a, okay, we're here now, let's just get through this. You know, hearing your voice and hearing Chavez's voice was a huge help. It's like you having that control over your mental and understanding what gets you in the birth zone, like it's so important because honestly change your experience 100%. Yeah.
1,000% for sure. And I also wanted to like back up for a second because I remember one thing I want to note here is like every midwife, their policies are different. So some people's timeline is like 24, 30 hours. If we don't have a baby after your water has been broken, then we're going to transfer to the hospital. Some providers are like 72 hours. So like that is a question to ask. My provider, like water broken. I've had clients who use the same provider as I did, and they were at home for days, you know, after their water had broken. So it is dependent on the provider piece. But I want to mention that I believe that your provider, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe they had a 24-hour rule, and then we were able to like, you know, work with them and advocate a little bit to be like, hey, give her a little bit more time and let's see what happens. And I just want to call that out too, because it's like, even though still we didn't birth at the birth center, like there was still some advocacy pieces that happened in that conversation. And I don't think a lot of women would advocate for themselves if they weren't confident enough to like say, oh, no, I'm fine. Like, give me a little bit more time. So anyways, I want to just like give you your flowers for that, because y'all did do a great job advocating to get more time than what was technically,
I wasn't like, you know, dilated enough
recommended on their part
at the birth center. Like I think I needed to be 6 or so centimeters, and I wasn't there yet. But another piece of, you know, hey, like she needs to rest, and you know, after those conversations, they allowed us to stay. So that was another part of it as well. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're transferring. You transferred. You said you noticed the shift of the environment, and then what happened?
It was just a little bit more chaotic than with the birth center. It was really just us in the room, and then a midwife or two would come in every, you know, are you guys okay? It was a lot more people in the room. It was a lot louder. It was a lot brighter. So complete shift of environment. But again, I think what helped me to focus was your voice. Oh, like you were talking to me like through the whole time. And even if I weren't looking at you, I could hear you. And also Chavez, because around that time, there's a lot of things going on actually that I had no idea, you know, that he was dealing with the staff and all of those things. I just could not imagine if he, you know, my mom, my team wasn't there. So we get, at this point, I think medication. And I'm like, I can't take this anymore. Like, I need something to help me out. And I think I was just saying that for a while. I was just saying it, and I just kept saying it. And I don't know what all was going on around me. I just knew that I was frustrated, and I was like, this anymore. Never came, but came like afterwards when they were doing the placenta removal and all that, but like before her birth, it never came. So I don't know what all of the discussions were that were happening, but I remember getting to that point, and you were like, you know, this is transition, Garrett. Like, this is, you're here. Like, you're basically here again. That voice in my mind that we did that was useful in terms of advocacy was the changing positions when I got to the hospital. That was actually very important because I was on my back for a while. And I think this is where her role came in a lot. Like, hey, can we put her on all fours? Can we get a peanut ball? Can we get, you know, asking for all of those things in the moment where, like, I couldn't ask for anything myself at that point. I was like at a place where I just wanted to get through it. And I think that was where all of this big change, that was where I was like thankful for you and for Vez during those moments the most.
There was a period of time, because I think you would just watch the video recently. Did you rewatch the video of your birth? So, and I don't know if you could hear, I think you could hear it. Yeah, you could hear it. There was a moment, and this sticks out to my mind at all. Like, every time I think about your birth, it always, like, is the main thing that comes to my mind. There was a moment, and I can't remember if you were pushing yet, but you were, like, really in your head. And I don't know if you were saying, I can't do this anymore, or I don't know what you were saying. I can't remember what exactly you were saying. But Chavez knew his role so well that he was like, get it together. You're not doing it, get it together. And I've had a few other clients whose relationships, is that him in the background? Oh, I thought I heard somebody, sorry. I've had a few families whose relationships are like that, where they can, like, the partner can give a little tough love and, like, help mom get back into the zone. And y'all were one of those couples. And I just remember him being like, no, Gigi, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. That's not what we planned for. That's not on our plan. And I just want to know from your perspective, like, how was that? Because sometimes we don't remember any of those things until we watch it. And in the moment, it can be very frustrating. Like, no, listen to me. This is what I'm saying. How would you say, like, this experience helped you just lean on him in this moment and, like, receive that and trust that he's telling you that for good reason, and not, other families who I've seen who will get really nervous and they'll just, like, not cave. The cave is not a good word to say, but, like, side or start pushing whatever the staff is pushing on the mom, even
my
though mom
trust in him. Obviously, that's
like
established
walk me through that part.
But also just knowing that he learned the exact same things that I learned. And through every step of the process, he was there in the exact like mentally where I needed to be, like, brought back down. And even in everyday life, I can be stubborn in that way. And sometimes he exactly what he did just in that moment. And he was like, no, like, that was his way of, like, snapping me back into it. And I think just calm down. Like, even though, like, it was almost like, okay, I'm here, like, I'm present. I heard him saying, like, no, this is not what we were going to do. I heard your voice, Garrett. Sometimes you just need back down. And in that moment, I think I was experiencing pain that I was experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're getting ready to push. So then, again, what I learned about
getting ready to push. So what? Tell us about that.
Ejection reflex was 100% true. You kind of have to experience it in order to really know what it is. But it was like, you'll know when you need to push, and that's exactly what happened in that moment. And I was pushing, and it was kind of like,
Yeah.
but um, hard, honestly, exhilarating and hard all at the same time, like knowing that you're so close to meeting your baby, and that's like one final thing. And so during the pushing was actually when we had to try a few different things. Like I was on my side at first, like one leg up on the, I forget what the bar is called that they had.
Uh-huh.
All fours. And I remember afterwards, my mom, she was like, I never knew that, like, you know, you could do that. Like, you could have fours, like, in the hospital, let alone, you know. And so it was kind of one of those experiences for her too, just getting to see something that.
Yeah. Yeah. You did it. And you did that. And you did that thing. I mean, y'all had a journey and you had like big decisions and all of those things. So tell, like, now that we're kind of like full circle, right? You started in a hospital or with an OB, transferred to a midwife, and then ended up giving birth in the hospital. Like, is there anything, because I think some women might say, well, I might as well have just stayed where I was at to begin with if I'm gonna end up at the hospital delivering. Like, what would you say to somebody whose perspective would be like, well, I heard this mom, she ended up transferring to the hospital, so like maybe I shouldn't go to the birth center, or maybe I shouldn't have an out of hospital birth, because if I'm gonna end up there, you know, the finances and the time and the efforts and all the things that I'm putting into this birth center birth, like what would you tell a mom,
Yeah,
who's listening to the story and is like, well, do you regret going to the birth center? I know you said you didn't,
definitely
but
don't regret
you
going to the
still ended
birth
up in the
center at all. I
hospital.
think
You know, how
what
did
I
you,
learned is
yeah,
that
how would you respond
we
to that?
do have more control over our birth than we think, or we can anyway. I think initially thinking about pregnancy, like before being educated anyway, was kind of like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
everyone just
yeah,
kind of gets it. Everyone is on the same page. And even when you do have to advocate, you have a team, you have your doula, you have your educated spouse, you have your midwife. Comfortable than it would have been with a provider that same page with from the beginning, and that likely wouldn't have supported the way that I wanted to give birth.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. That is amazing. And I do think, because I've had a few other families who I've been able to support in person and virtually, whose stories, you know, were similar in terms of plan for an out of hospital birth, ended up in the hospital, and almost got this redemptive experience in the hospital because of everything that they knew and how they navigated in that environment versus how they would have with a lot of the fears that they had about hospitals to begin with. And so you're one of those stories that's like, y'all, the bottom line here is like, you need to have a team and you need to be educated. Like that makes a big difference. And I hate that it's a reality. I really hate that it's the reality, but like you get treated so much differently in hospital settings when you're educated and when you're not educated. Like I've seen it with my own eyes when women are educated versus when they're not educated. And being smart, book smart, having had a 4.0 doesn't make you like birth smart. Like you can be book smart and not birth smart, right? Like there's a difference. And so I just want you guys to listen to Garrett's story and also understand like how many times she mentioned her husband being educated. Like Garrett knew what to expect. She knew what was going on, and her husband knew what to expect and what was going on. So when her brain turned off, because that's what we want your brain to turn off in labor, because all I want you to do is think about your body. And if you're in tune with your body, then your brain is kind of like just following whatever is going on. But she knew she had the brains right there. Obviously, I was there with them too, but like, even if I wasn't there virtually with you, like I feel very confident that Chavez would have been fine to do the things, you know? And so I just am so proud of y'all. Like I'm so happy that even a year later we get to share your story, because so many people need to see and hear like that there's not just one way to do this. And sometimes our parents and our families can be this voice that you feel almost more pressure to than the doctors sometimes, because like my mom said, and I'm like, yeah, but your mom's not the one giving birth. Like sure to do that for you. This is your turn. And to see, you know, also to like be the first people in your family to do this way, and then allow your mom or your dad or your sister or whatever to see that, like you're opening the door for how your daughter will give birth one day. And it's going to change the narrative of birth in your entire family. So as we kind of wrap this up, what advice would you give to a family who is preparing to have a natural birth? What things would you want them to consider doing? What things would you want them to keep in mind? Like, what are some things that you would give them as far as advice? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. And y'all, you know, I want you to save this and rewatch it. It will be on my page, but I want you to save it and rewatch it, because I think every single birth story that is shared on this platform, there's so many things that you can take away from each of them to really like figure out what it is that you want your experience to look like. It may not look like Garrett's, it may not look like anybody else's, but like you have the ability to create the experience that you want, and navigate any changes that come along, like she did, with grace and with confidence and with strength and with power and all of those things. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to be there with you during the journey. This is definitely something that y'all are going to change lives and change people's lives and people's narratives and perspectives of birth. So I'm just grateful. And hopefully, you know, I will be able to come see y'all in Spain one day. But until then, we're going to stick with this virtual piece. But y'all also just keep in mind, like, if there are virtual doulas out there that, you know, you follow or you like, definitely take that into consideration, because it's really a matter of like getting educated and making sure your partner is educated, and like having that coaching and that guidance, even if it's not just like, even if it's just during your pregnancy, like that still matters, and that still gets you to the place where your partner can be prepared. Or if that person can support you on the day of your birth, like that's also a really good opportunity. So explore those options, even if it's not what you go with, at least give it a shot and have a conversation to see if some virtual doula that you connect with online can be that way. And then the last thing I want to ask you is like, how has life been after being a mom for a year? Like, how did the birth help you transition into motherhood and navigate motherhood for the first year? Yeah. I love that. Mm, I love that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all, if this was inspiring for you or if this was encouraging for you, there are two ways that you can get supported. First way is just through joining our community, our virtual birth coaching community of families similar to Garrett. And we walk together every single week and get you prepared for birth. And that is going through the same exact curriculum that Garrett and Chavez went through. So there's no changes, no surprises, and you do have that person to walk with you. And then, of course, if you want to be encouraged with having support on the day of, there's also that opportunity. If you're like, I want to be supported, but I want somebody also there with me on the day of, like virtually, that's also an option and a way that we can support you, or I can support you and your family. So if that any of that interests you, check out my bio. Obviously, my space is limited because I can only provide that level of birthday support for a certain number of people each month. But if that sounds like something you're interested in, please check that out in my bio. And stay tuned, because there's something else on the way, not a baby, but there's something else on the way for the moms who are listening to this, who've already had a baby. Garrett alluded to some spiritual motherhood things, and just stay tuned, and something will be dropping this week for those of you who are believers and who love Jesus and love motherhood. So that's a little bit of a intro preview for you, but just stay tuned for that. And Garrett, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you for letting me borrow you for an hour. I will give you back to your family now. But y'all, this will be saved. If you have any other questions, encouragement, words that, you know, words of advice or words of encouragement for any other moms, or even just celebrating Garrett and her family, drop them in the comments after I post this. And this will be here forever for you to rewatch as many times as you want. So thank you. Love y'all. I'll talk with you soon. And have a good, what day is it? Wednesday.